Hello, and thank you for joining me for today's episode of The Thing About Birth. Each episode I will dive into a different topic relating to birth, pregnancy, hypnobirthing and parenting. Keep an eye out for special Q&A episodes, guest episodes and relaxation episodes. Thank you to those who have liked, shared, subscribed, watched and listened so far. It really means the world to me. Enjoy! Hi there. Today I'm going to dive straight into things because it's going to be probably a bit of a longer episode. I'm going to be recapping my birth story from my third baby. There were episodes previous to this that were sort of documenting my pregnancy, so I'll try not to get too far into that, but I do just want to recap the sort of main elements of my pregnancy and also what the last couple of weeks were before she was born. So she was born in December. My estimated due date was the 1st of December, which seemed pretty accurate to us based on our own calculations, and it was also what the scan showed. It was how the midwife estimated it, so it seemed pretty accurate. My pregnancy was classed as high risk from the start, some of you may remember. My previous two children had been quite small. I'd had one pregnancy, which was my second pregnancy, which was low pape and a severe postpartum hemorrhage. My first pregnancy was absolutely fine, but he was born 9 days late and was classed as low gestational birth weight. So they were more concerned based on that. First pregnancy was a low gestational birth weight. It's how my third pregnancy would develop. I think probably because they weren't sure why he was classed as small, not why he was classed as small, why he was born small. My husband and I are not giants, so it's not really a surprise to us that we'd had small babies. So from the outset, they were sort of on the lookout for low pape and want to monitor me for growth scans. Now, I was quite happy to be monitored for growth scans because with my second pregnancy, her weight dropped towards the end of the pregnancy, and that was quite a bit of a cause for concern. So I was quite happy for that. They recommended I take aspirin straight away, but I opted to wait until we'd had our tests done at 12 weeks just to see if I did have low pape, and I didn't, so I was pleased that I didn't opt for the aspirin. We were under a really, really reassuring and supportive consultant, and he was really great with giving us information about sort of the low pape, the aspirin, what they would do in terms of monitoring me for postpartum hemorrhage. He gave great quantitative data about how likely it would be that I would hemorrhage again, and all of this is detailed in previous episodes and also on my blog, so I'm not going to sort of go over that again. The main takeaway from all of the really helpful information that he gave was that he said from the get-go that as long as everything was going fine on the growth scans, he'd be more than happy for me to just kind of get on with it. Obviously, it's always your choice as to how you allow things to progress, but he wasn't going to sort of become too concerned with pushing me into any sort of decisions, so that was great. We had our first growth scan and we were actually told that the baby had a chunky tum and was measuring on the 96th centile, so this completely changed the trajectory of our sort of pregnancy and labour. We'd gone from being on watch for small baby to being on watch for big baby. I was a bit concerned in the initial days of finding out that the baby was measuring big, because I know from experience as a hypnobirthing instructor what this means before I was even told, and it means that they would be looking for potentially inducing me early, because with bigger babies they worry about something called shoulder dystocia, which is basically where the baby gets stuck in the when it's coming out. So it's usually that one of the shoulders gets stuck, and that can cause various different problems. So I kind of spiraled a little bit, but I did some journaling, I did some research, and I found out some really great things that helped keep me grounded and not be too concerned. Further growth scans showed that the weight had dropped to normal range, which was great. When we got to 38 weeks, we had our final growth scan and consultant appointment, and the baby was head down and still measuring on that same normal range curve, still on the bigger side compared to what we'd had previously, but nothing astronomical. At this point, the consultant gave us 3 options. He was very laid back about all of it, like he had been from the get-go. He said that we could be induced, but he explained that there was no guarantee. If my cervix wasn't favourable, it probably wouldn't work, and it couldn't stop the baby from getting stuck. He also said that babies don't gain that much weight in the last few weeks anyway, so the chances of the baby changing in size dramatically between then and me giving birth were low. He advised we could bypass vaginal birth altogether and have a cesarean, but that babies can still get stuck in a cesarean delivery. And then he said we could just do nothing and just see what happened. He explained that midwives are quite good at doing a particular manoeuvre that helps babies become unstuck, and that there's usually somebody on hand to help with an assisted delivery, but by the time they get there, the midwife's usually dealt with it anyway. We opted to do nothing, knowing we could request an induction or a cesarean at a later date if we wanted to. We did have in our head what our cut-off date was for how pregnant I wanted to be before we would accept an induction, and that was that I didn't want to go over 22 weeks. Not 22 weeks. I didn't want to go over 42 weeks. That sounds much better. I didn't want to go over 42 weeks because it was getting closer to Christmas, and I just didn't want to be that freshly postpartum for Christmas. It was already going to be, I was still going to be in the main recovery period, and so I wanted to avoid that if I could. We saw the midwife on my birthday at the end of November. She was really nice and supportive. She wasn't our usual community midwife because she was on holiday. She asked if we wanted to sweep, which we declined, and we briefly talked about induction, but we had sort of explained that we weren't in the position at that time to want to request one. She was quite happy with that. So I did some research, and what I found out about shoulder dystocia that really helped ground me in my decision to not be induced was that it's impossible to predict, so it's impossible to prevent. It can happen to any size baby. It can happen during a cesarean delivery, and it's quite a low chance of it happening. I didn't really tick the boxes for being at risk of it happening, just the size of the baby. And one other thing that I found out is that clinically speaking, a big baby is £8.13. And based on growth scans, which can be inaccurate, but also just my size and my husband's size, I just could not see it being very likely that I was growing an £8.13 baby. So we opted to do nothing, and I just really leaned into doing physical movements that were getting the baby into a good position, focusing on my positive birth, affirmations and visualizations, and just refining our birth plan, and just really kind of listening to myself, listening to my instincts, just to keep myself in that headspace. On the 4th of December, so between the 1st and the 4th, we'd done kind of a lot of walking, a lot of getting jobs done and things. On the 4th of December, I went to see my community midwife, and I declined a sweep and induction. The midwife was quite shocked that I hadn't gone into labour at that point. When I walked in, she made a joke about smacking me on the tipping me upside down and smacking me like a ketchup bottle. She had a feel of my tummy though, and she'd said that the baby was fully engaged, and that it couldn't get any lower without it coming out. At that point, we went for a walk, and then we got home, and I was doing a lot of cleaning, mopping, sweeping. Had a bit of a rest and watched the telly for a bit. We got the kids from school that day, and they came home, and we just continued with our normal day. And that night, the kids were in bed, and I was sitting on the couch playing Hogwarts Legacy. For a while, like weeks and weeks and months, I'd been getting Braxton Hicks, and I was getting my Braxton Hicks as normal. And maybe after about not even an hour of sitting on the couch, I sort of noticed that the Braxton Hicks they were a bit stronger than normal, and they had a bit of a pattern to them. They would come in maybe every 20 minutes or so. And at around between 9 and 9:30, sorry, I keep looking down because I'm referring to my notes. If you're watching me on YouTube, it's because I've got notes written here in front of me. So from about 9:30, I mentioned it to my husband. I had said to him, because for maybe a week or two, every so often, I'd get like this very mild, repetitive sensation, and I had said to them at that point, when do you want me to tell you that I'm getting these feelings? Because I don't want to be every single time I get them be like, oh, something might be happening. And so he had said, just when I start to feel like it could be something more than just, Braxton Hicks. So on this particular night, because they've been going on so frequently for, an hour or so, I decided to mention it to him. I got on the birth ball, and I sort of said to him, this is probably nothing. I'm going to be on the ball. I'll go to bed, and I'll probably wake up very disappointed that nothing has happened. I was playing Hogwarts Legacy on my son's Nintendo Switch, and I just bounced away for, another hour or so, and the sensations continued at the same sort of pace. But I decided at that point that it was probably time to go to bed, just in case it was going to be anything. I thought, you know what, I want to just give myself the best chance at having some rest. So sort of around 10:30, I headed up, did all my sort of, nighttime routine, my skincare and everything, got into bed with my twinkly lights on, and listened to a hypnobirthing track, and then went to sleep. I managed to actually get to sleep, which I was worried that I wouldn't be able to do. But I actually did all right, and I sort of slept on and off, and I'd be woken up probably what I felt like was every sort of 20 minutes or so, and I would just continue to get these sensations, which I kept telling myself was still just Braxton Hicks, and that it was probably nothing. But I was just breathing through them, and it was quite exciting as well. I've never gone into spontaneous labour before, so it was very exciting thinking that I possibly could be, but at the same time very much trying to just tell myself it was probably nothing. Sent a message to my mum saying that exact sentence, it's probably nothing, but I've been having some sensations. So yeah, and this just continued, and then at about 3 a.m. I thought, I don't think I can lie down anymore. I need to get up and move about. And when I got up, that woke my husband up, and he was sort of up next to me, and I was kind of rocking backwards and forwards through these sensations. And he started to suggest that we ring the hospital. We ring his mum and my mum, and I'd sort of said, it's too soon to alert anybody. It's just gonna be, cause unnecessary stress, and it's too soon to ring the hospital, and just kind of, kept at it. And he kept pushing that we should ring the hospital. I kept saying it's too soon to ring the hospital, and eventually he just said to me, Ashley, your contractions are about 2.5 minutes apart. We have to ring the hospital. And that really surprised me because at this point I thought that they were still a good 20 minutes or so apart. Once we made that decision though, things started to move very quickly. Rob, my husband, rang our parents. My mother-in-law was coming to watch the older children while I was going to the hospital, and my mum wanted to be there at the birth, so he rang them, and I went to the loo, got myself changed, brushed my teeth and all of that, and then I headed downstairs. He was kind of running about just gathering up the very last minute things that you can't pre-pack, and just making sure that everything was as prepared as possible for my mother-in-law coming. And we rang the hospital, and thankfully while we were on the phone I had a contraction. She was kind of saying to me, you know, if you're not more than 4 centimeters dilated, we'll send you home. And that got me a little bit panicked because I was getting to a point now where I was kind of thinking, I don't know if I can be at home anymore. And so they told me to come in. I grabbed I had like a little hospital transfer kit ready that was sort of, you know, my lavender bag, my birth comb, my earbuds, you know, a playlist to be listening to. Actually, I wanted to listen to affirmations, eye masks, that I wasn't seeing what was going on. And I had a hold of things in my hand, but I was using my lavender bag and my birth comb to kind of help me manage the contractions. And I had my big water bottle, this guy, you know, in my hand, and I had a whole grip in this eye mask that I never put on, and I never listened to my affirmations or anything. My mother-in-law arrived and we got in the car, and by this point I was so focused in on myself that I couldn't think about using these other elements. We got to the hospital. It's just a really short drive away, and it was about 5 a.m. The car park was really empty, really quiet. We didn't take the suitcase upstairs because I was so convinced that they were going to send me home, and I didn't want it to be this, you know, we take it and don't need it kind of thing. That just tells me how much I was trying to focus on that I'm not actually in labour element of things, which is what I quite often tell people to do. You know, just ignore it for as long as you can. We walked along to the pregnancy assessment unit, which is really, really far away from the car park, with me stopping every so often to have a contraction. And at one point I actually laughed as I was on my way there. I think it was a I can't quite believe this is happening kind of situation. We got there, and I kind of rang the little buzzer, and she asked who I was, and I just said my name, and I was like, I'm in labour. And so obviously that was the point where I was kind of like, okay, this maybe really is happening. So along we went, and they triaged me. It was about 5:15 in the morning at this point, and I accepted a vaginal examination, which I had in my birth plan that I was quite happy to accept upon arrival, but then after that I didn't want any unless I requested them. She told me I was 8 centimetres dilated, which was really interesting because when I'd written out a positive birth visualisation in my journal, that was how dilated I wanted to be when I got to the hospital in that visualisation. So I thought that was super, super interesting. She said she could also feel my waters bulging, so she was like, I don't want to, you know, have too much of a feel because I don't want to burst them. I asked if the birth pool was available, and she said that it wasn't, but that the lady that was waiting to get in was possibly having some issues with blood pressure, so she'd find out if she maybe wasn't able to get in. She went off, she came back, she said that the lady was unfortunately having to go elsewhere, but this meant that the pool was not only available, it was ready filled. She got me she did all of my checks and everything, and then got me a wheelchair, but I didn't want it, even though the walk from the triage room to the room with the birth balloon was super far. I just knew that I wouldn't be able to sit down while I was having these contractions. So off we walked. Now the birth pool room is really, really lovely, very calming. It's got nice affirmations on the wall. Just really, a really lovely room. Not like what I've experienced before. They wanted to just add like a little bit of extra warm water in, and they also wanted to put a cannula in the back of my hand just in case I had another postpartum hemorrhage. They wanted to be able to act quickly with the medication that they would need to give me. They couldn't get it in while I wasn't in the pool though, because my contractions were coming so thick and fast by that point. So they let me get in the pool, and by that point I then did not feel the cannula. So that was quite good. I continued using the birth comb, and I was very noisy, very focused on myself. I think at this point I was actually starting to transition, because I was also starting to spiral a little bit. I kept thinking, I don't know if I can do this in the pool. I think I need to get out of the pool. But thankfully, the logical part of my mind was able to say, do not utter those words, because once you're out, that's it. You won't be getting back in. So I just really kind of, head down and focused. I was on my hands and knees, which was great because that's where I wanted to be. But I kept thinking, I need something else. Side note, before I'd gotten into the pool, I'd actually already started getting the slight urge to push. Just a little urge, but it was like I was really bearing down with each contraction. Anyway, in the pool, I felt like I needed something extra to take the edge off, and I could not think what I could possibly have, because I didn't want pharmaceutical pain relief. And I couldn't think, what is there that isn't an epidural or pethidine? And then I remembered that gas and air is a thing, and just suddenly kind of head up, can I have gas and air, please? So they gave it to me, and that, while I don't think that for me really does much pain relief wise, it just helps focus your breathing a bit. So that was quite good, but I didn't have that one. Oh, excuse me. I didn't have it for very long. I felt the urge to push really quickly, and the midwives were really encouraging. They kept telling me to listen to my body. I felt my waters break, and I felt the baby start to crown. And at this point, my mum wasn't there yet, so I was a bit worried that she wasn't going to make it. I felt like the baby was crowning for ages. I felt like her head was stuck. In reality, it wasn't that long. The midwives told me to get ready to catch her, so I let go of my comb and my gas and air, so that I could brace with one hand and have my other hand ready, and she didn't come out for what felt like ages. But I could feel her head. I could feel that she had loads of hair. I didn't know at this point that she was a girl either, by the way. But just that being able to feel her head crowning was an absolutely amazing, incredible experience. They were checking me with a mirror. They did try at one point to check me with the Doppler, but I don't know. I have no idea how that worked for them, if it did or not. They didn't ask again. Then I did a big push, and out she came. And I sort of sat back with the midwives telling me, be careful not to sit on her. They coached me on how to bring her up, because you have to be careful that you bring them up face first, because as soon as their skin touches the air, they take a breath in. So up she came. I saw that she was a girl. Oh, my mum did make it in time. I forgot to say. Just as I was, thinking she's not going to make it in time, I heard somebody open the door and go, Tracy's here. That's my mum's name. And in she ran. Apparently they literally ran her down this really long corridor to get me there. So she made it just by the skin of her teeth, I think. So yeah, and I just kind of then just sat with her on my chest, cuddling her to me, and I just sat there, and I couldn't believe that had happened. They triaged me at 5:15, and she was born at 5:55, 5 to 6. So I didn't have time to put on my birth playlist. I didn't get to use my room spray. I didn't have my affirmations and photos up. didn't have my twinkly lights on. I mean, they dimmed the lights for me, so that was nice. But yeah, that didn't get to use any of my oxytocin boosting stuff or my birth environment, birth nest stuff, which I thought was really funny. Because it didn't matter. It was funny because it didn't matter when it came down to it that I didn't get to use that stuff. I'd really wanted to use it. I'd planned it out really, really well, and I would always say to people that they should plan it out really well. But the important thing is that if it comes down to it and you don't need it, that's great. It's much better to have and not need than need and wish you had it, you know? So because I was at risk of a second postpartum hemorrhage, they wanted me out of the pool fairly quickly. They didn't want me to birth my placenta in the pool. Well, I wanted a managed third stage because of the postpartum hemorrhage risks. So they got me out of the pool, which was really a big challenge in itself, trying to sort of get up and step over the edge of the pool. And then they got me up onto the bed, and I had my third stage birth, placental birth, and it was probably the most straightforward one I've ever had. My placenta is still in the freezer because I want to do something with it, but facilitating that has been quite difficult. I had a 2nd degree tear which needed stitching. They had to leave me an hour before they stitched me up because of the water birth. I had no postpartum hemorrhage, and I just for it was a bit of a shock to the system giving birth so quickly. It was very, very intense, and after the first day I think I was a little bit in shock. But those initial few hours after I'd given birth, I couldn't believe how it had happened. I laughed at one point while I was getting stitched up, while I was remembering it. The midwife was shocked that I'd laughed, but it was because I was just remembering how it had all gone. And I still to this day look back and I think I can't believe how straightforward it was, how fast it was, but more than anything, how I birthed on my own terms. Oh, she weighed £8.10 as well. So not technically a big, clinically speaking, baby, but my biggest baby after having a £6.6 and a £6.5. My biggest baby. So I'm going to leave it there for now because I'm getting a storage warning on my phone. I am going to come back to talk a little bit about the postpartum period soon, and I'll also be talking a bit about what parenting's been like, parenting 3 children. But I'm just going to leave my birth story there for now. There is a blog up about it as well, so you can also read it too. But thank you for listening to my story. It was really lovely to share it finally. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to going into a little bit more detail about things at a later point. Thank you so much for listening today. Please, if you haven't already, like, share, subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Ashley Nicole Hypnobirthing, and sign up for my monthly mailing list, The Thing About Birth, where you'll also get a free birth plan template and writing guide. See you next time!